6.2, the quadratic formula. Your quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. You have something called the discriminant, which is what is underneath the radical. It's that expression underneath the radical, the b squared minus 4 times a times c. That discriminant tells you how many and what type of solutions an equation has. If your discriminant is greater than 0, you have two real solutions and it crosses the x-axis twice. If it only has one solution, it has 0, or I'm sorry, if it's equal to 0, it'll have one solution and it crosses the x-axis once. And then if it is less than 0, it will have two imaginary solutions and it never crosses the x-axis. So with our first section here, we're telling the number and types of solutions for each equation. So we want to get everything on the same side of that equal sign. So with example A, we're going to move that 7 over first, and we're going to be left with x squared minus 6x plus 7 is equal to 0. We're going to take our discriminant, which is that b squared minus 4 times a times c, and plug in our values. So our a is 1, our b is negative 6, and our c is 7. So we're plugging these in. Our b squared is going to be negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 7. When we do this, we are going to get 36 minus 4 times 7 is negative 28. 36 minus 28 gives us 8. 8 is greater than 0, so because 8 is greater than 0, we have two solutions. And tell the number of solutions and what type of solution. So this is going to cross the x-axis twice. If we look at b, we have x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 9. So again, we're going to move that 9 over. So we have x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. Our a is 1, our b is negative 6, our c is 9. So plug this into your discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So we're going to have b squared, which is negative 6 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 9. The negative 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. So 36 minus 36 is 0. 0 is equal to 0. So we have one solution. And it crosses the x-axis once. For c, we have x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 11. Again, we're going to move that 11 over. So we have x squared minus 6x plus 11 is equal to 0. Our a is 1, our b is negative 6, our c is 11. Use your discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So this is going to be negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 11. The negative 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 11 is negative 44. The 36 minus 44 is negative 8. Negative 8 is less than 0, so we have no solution here. Or two imaginary solutions. So we can actually write two imaginary solutions here. And this one will not cross the x-axis. For D, we have x squared minus 4x is equal to negative 4. We're going to add the 4 to both sides. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 0. Our a is 1, our b is negative 4, our c is 4. So this is going to be negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. That is equal to 0. 0 is equal to 0, so we have one solution. And then that one also will cross the x-axis once. For E, we have 2x squared plus 3x minus 1 is equal to 0. Everything's on the same side, so our A is 2, our B is 3, our C is negative 1. If we plug this in, we're going to have 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 1. We simplify this, we have 9 minus 8 times negative 1, which is 9 plus 8, and that is 17. 17 is greater than 0, so we have two solutions here. For F, we have negative x squared minus 5x is equal to negative 9. We're going to add that 9 to both sides. So it's going to be negative x squared minus 5x plus 9 is equal to 0. Our A is negative 1, our B is negative 5, our C is 9. Plug it into your discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So negative 5 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times 9. The negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. 4 times 9 is 36. So 25 plus 36 gives us 61. 61 is greater than 0, so we have two solutions here. Your next part of your notes deals with finding the zeros. When we find the zeros, we pick out our A, our B, our C, and then we go ahead and plug them into our quadratic formula. So remember, your quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So if we look at example 1, we have x squared plus 10x plus 2. Our a is 1, our b is 10, our c is 2. Plug these in, negative b, so negative 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 10 squared, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 2, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. Simplify what's underneath the radical. We're going to have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 4 times 2 is negative 8, all over 2. 100 minus 8 is 92, so that's negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 92, all over 2. When you do the square root of 92, the 92 is 4 and 23. The 4 is 2 and 2. The 23 is prime. So you have two 2's here. So this is going to be negative 10 plus or minus 2 square root 23 all over 2. Now you'll realize each number here, the negative 10, the 2 and the 2 in the denominator are all divisible by 2. So we're going to divide each of these by 2. The 2's become 1's. The negative 10 becomes negative 5. So this is negative 5 plus or minus 1 times the square root of 23, which is just the square root of 23. For B, we have x squared minus 8x plus 10. So our A is 1, our B is negative 8, our C is 10. We're going to plug this into our quadratic formula. So x is equal to negative b, so negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's negative 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10, all over 2 times a. So that's 2 times 1. Simplify this. The two negatives next to each other with the 8 turn into positives. So x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared is 64. Minus 4 times 10 is 40. So negative 40 all over 2 times 1, which is 2. We simplify this even further. We have x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 40 is 24 all over 2. Now the 24. The 24 is 4 and 6. The 4 is 2 and 2. The 6 is 2 and 3. You have two 2's. So this becomes x is equal to 8 plus or minus 2 square root 6 all over 2. Once again, the 2's and the 8 are all divisible by 2. So it just is x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 6. For C, we have x squared minus 8x is plus 10. So our A is 1, our B is negative 8, our C is 10. We're going to plug this into our quadratic formula. So x is equal to negative b. So negative times negative 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10, all over 2 times a. So 2 times 1. Simplify this. The two negatives next to each other turn into positives. So x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 40. All over 2. So from here, we're right back where we did this question before this. So x is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 24 all over 2. This is going to become x is equal to 8 plus or minus 2 square root 6 all over 2. And then the 2's become 1's, the 8 becomes a 4. So that's just x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 6. For D, we have f of x is equal to 2x squared minus x plus 2. So our A is 2, our B is negative 1, and our C is 2. So plug these in. We're going to have x is equal to negative times negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2, all over 2 times 2. So this is going to become 1. X is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. So 1 minus 16 all over 4. From here, we are going to simplify this even further. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 15 all over 4. This negative 15, because that negative is underneath there, we are going to simplify this even further and pull that negative out and put it in front with that I. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus I square root 15 all over 4. For E, we have 3x squared minus x plus 8. So our A is 3, our B is negative 1, and our C is 8. So plugging them in, x is equal to negative 1 times negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times 8 all over 2 times 3. The two negatives next to each other turn to positive, so x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times 8 is negative 96. All over 6. So we are going to subtract the 1 minus 96, gives us negative 95. So that's x is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of 95, negative 95, I'm sorry, all over 6. We simplify further, bring that negative out. 95 is just 5 and 19. So we can't simplify that radical, so it's just x is equal to 1 plus or minus I times the square root of 95 all over 6. For f, we have f of x is equal to 3x squared plus x minus 1. So a is 3, b is 1, c is negative 1. Plug these in. X is equal to negative b, so negative 1, plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1, all over 2 times 3. This is going to leave us with x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 12 all over 6. The 1 plus 12 is 13, so x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 13 all over 6. For g, we have f of x is equal to 5x squared minus 6x plus 3, so our a is 5, our b is negative 6, and our c is 3. So x is equal to negative times negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times 5 times 3 all over 2 times 5. So this is going to be x is equal to positive 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. The negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Negative 20 times 3 is negative 60. So 36 minus 60 underneath the radical, all over 10. The 36 minus 60 is going to give us negative 24. So this is x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 24 all over 10. Simplify this even further. Pull that I out. The square root of the 24 is 4 and 6. The 4 is 2 and 2. The 6 is 2 and 3. So this is x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2i square root 6 all over 10. Now, the 6, the 10, and the 2 are all divisible by 2. So the 2 is going to become a 1, the 6 becomes a 3, the 10 becomes a 5. So it's just x is equal to 3 plus or minus I square root 6 all over 5.